Hey, it's your old pal Lucid Stew again. I'm working on a grid-based movement mechanic for my first Dreams game, and I wanted to show you how it works, so let's take a look. I'm working with a basic blank puppet and have removed all the stuff I don't need. That has left me with a controller sensor, puppet interface, auto guide, and sound effects. The rest controls the grid movement. D-pad control output runs to a selector, which I'm using as a state machine. It has 5 states, wait for input, and 1 for each direction. The direction outputs run into a node which consolidates those states into a while moving state. Those signals also run into a microchip which converts them into the stick information that the puppet interface wants to receive as input. In stick terms, each direction is a collection of 0 in one axis and 1 or -1 in the other axis. This can be achieved simply by running the signal into a combiner the correct way. 2 of the signals use a calculator to convert the signal to -1. The puppet uses 2 trigger zones to relate to the tag grid and determine the appropriate action. One trigger zone is placed in front of the puppet just far enough away to not be activated by the tag grid when the puppet is standing on a tag. The trigger zones are set to detect the tag. All of the tags in the tag grid are named the same. The in-front zone and the while moving node both output to an AND gate. When the puppet is in a moving state and the in-front zone is not active, the AND gate outputs a signal to a signal manipulator. The signal manipulator is set to custom remapper toggle output it on. This turns the signal manipulator into a switch, which can be used to turn the second trigger zone off and on. The second trigger zone is set directly where you want the puppet to be in relation to the grid. When the puppet is at a grid tag, the second trigger zone called AT will activate. This indicates that the puppet has arrived at the next tag in the grid. This zone is in line with the in-front trigger zone and a little bit behind it. When the AT trigger zone is activated by the tag, it outputs a signal to 2 places. One is back to the signal manipulator, which toggles output and turns the AT trigger zone off. The other runs to the selector and switches to the 5th state. This causes puppet motion to cease by cutting off the signal to the puppet interface. It also allows controller input to resume by cutting off the signal to the while moving node. This system does require a grid of tags to establish a movement grid, so that can be somewhat limiting. However, usually this type of mechanic is not used in combination with huge free-roaming environments anyway. Now here's a look at the grid-based puppet movement in action. The major advantage to doing it this way is that you let the engine do most of the work. You don't have to do any custom animation, and the logic is simple to the tune of only 12 gadgets minus the tags. This is currently set up to be controlled with local D-pad directional, but you could remap it just about any way you wanted with a little work. Just now we experienced a bug where the character skipped a tag and traversed 2 on one move. This system is sensitive to movement speed and can become unstable when doing things like turning around because the in-front trigger doesn't activate properly. However, turning this movement speed down fixes the problem. Getting this to work with running speeds would require some additional logic, perhaps by utilizing the in-front trigger to slow the character down before it gets to a tag. One nice thing about this particular system is that the grid can be easily resized to expand the playfield or accommodate different types of scene maps. In this case, I'm changing the distance between tags from 2 to 5. In order to do this, I simply delete all the tags but 1. I then clone that one at the new spacing. I don't do it here, but it's a good idea with this system to keep the tags small, as they serve as a better indicator of their scene position, which is what activates the trigger zones. Of course, when this is done in practice, the sculpts used in a scene won't need to be in a grid. However, you will need to find a way to represent the grid to the player. I'm doing that here with an actual grid of sculpts, with the sculpture detail turned down so the gaps between them are more apparent. You can also see I'm changing the resolution of the grid with no negative effect to the system. The first grid was 8 by 8, this one is 10 by 10. The grids also don't need to be square. One thing of paramount importance though is that your grid puppets be placed directly over a tag for the start of the scene. This needs to be precise. You can see I'm using 1/8 scale with the grid on to accomplish this. The puppets also need to be aligned with the control scheme you're using so that when you press up on the D-pad, the puppet moves up on the screen, and the same for the other directions. Now let's take a look at how it works with the new grid spacing. Still works great. However, when changing things like this, you may need to tweak a few things like the size and spacing of the trigger zones. There are a lot of ways you can tweak this concept, and this is the very beginning of me working on it, so expect more, and I'll see you next time.